So welcome to Driving a Movement, our first Brown Pie Energy Voices event of 2024. And that's where we explore the pressing topics and hear the enlightening perspectives of leaders across the energy sector. My name is Will Basanko, and I lead our energy practice at Brown Pie. And we're an independent consultancy, and we work with leaders across the sector to clarify their organization's role in the transition and then help them to activate it across their business, brand, and culture. And today we'll explore how two leaders are driving a specific movement within the larger transition, focusing on one of the technologies that will help us get there, electric vehicles. And why EVs? Why is this such an interesting conversation for us today? Well, we know that electrification and EV infrastructure is really rapidly growing and increasingly important. I think, in fact, in this decade alone, we're set to see demand for EVs grow sixfold. You can both correct me on that in a moment, but there's still many challenges and complexities on the road ahead. So enter the power of brand and communication as a tool to build understanding and drive this movement. And today I'm very, very lucky to be joined by two pioneering voices in the world of EV to share their wisdom and learnings as they have sought to engage their stakeholders, attract the best talent, and clarify their own business's role in the transition. So first of all, so pleased to introduce Monique Bertnsen, who is the Global Head of Brand, Communication and Marketing at Maer. Monique has been working in the EV industry for over 7 years and has very rich experience in this field, having worked across startups and scale-ups in the sector. And Maer is a business very close to my heart, Monique, as you know, having been part of the team that defined that brand back in 2020. So delighted you could join us.
Yeah, thank you, Will. And I'm so happy to be here. And yeah, what's an introduction as well. As you know, we have been on quite a journey since we started, and being a witness to that for over 7 years, and from a startup to a scale up, where we now have over 400 employees in Norway, Sweden, UK, Germany, and Austria. Then obviously a lot has happened since then. And yeah, we are serving over 36,000 charging points across these markets. And in 2022, we provided over 108 million kilowatt hours in our network. That's actually the equivalent of 13,000 times around the globe, which is
Wow.
kind of impressive. Yeah.
Incredible. The growth
Yeah.
has been quite something to witness. So I can't wait to hear more from your journey today. And joining Monique, we also have Matt Teske, who is the founder and CEO of Chargeway, a company doing all sorts of wonderful innovation in the EV charging experience. Matt's career has been very much focused on branding and marketing strategies in automotive, energy, and lifestyle as well. And I know, Matt, you developed Chargeway seeking to help create a better understanding of those complexities within the EV charging landscape and how we can better use electricity as a fuel. So I'm so excited that you're also here with us.
Thank you, Will, and Monique. It's great to chat with you again, and looking forward to the conversation. And yeah, for Chargeway and the work that we've been doing, and as you described, the background that I have, it's predominantly focused on communication, branding, and strategy, and it's been a lot of automotive over the last 2+ decades. And for the learnings out of that background, as I really wanted to become as an expert as I could in the energy sector, is what's the gap, what's missing. And Chargeway was born out of those learnings and my own experiences of owning and driving electric cars for the last decade. And at the end of the day, it really boils down to what we're asking the public to do, which is we want them to drive cars that they already do drive every day, that drive on a new fuel type, being electricity. And so our goal is to make that as easy to understand as possible, using simple language and simple software so that people can actually make that transition with confidence.
Absolutely. I can't wait to dive into some stories and examples as to how you've done that, Matt, because some of the things you've been doing are really, really cool and innovative. But let's start then with you both by busting some myths. That's where I'd love to start this conversation. Let's think about the world of EVs, and are there any, let's say, what's the one misconception you think is out there that people have around EVs and EV charging? What would you like to change? What's the one myth that you'd like to bust?
That's a big question. Monique, you want to go first? I don't know.
Ooh. Yeah, well, the obvious one from being from Norway is obviously that EVs don't work when it's cold. So that's a myth that we can bust fairly easy here in Norway.
And what about you?
Oh, I would say, well, and frankly, in the US, we're starting to see more of that. We're a very large country, but the learnings from Norway are very honest around, yeah, these do work in the cold. I think the do work in the cold part comes with the understanding of how to use them in your lifestyle. And I think the myth that we would love to really break through and show people is not true is the fact that you can trust using electricity as a fuel no matter what lifestyle you have, warm, cold, rural, urban. There's a lot of ways to understand it, but I think the myth that you can't charge in a way that works for your lifestyle is something that I think most people still talk about in the US. They just fundamentally don't understand, how it will work. They hear one thing like it takes me 8 hours to charge overnight. So then they therefore think that it takes 8 hours to charge an electric car, which is just not true. It's just one way to charge an electric car. So I think the myth of how you use electricity as a fuel efficiently is something that we would like to break through, and it's a big part of the conversation I think that a lot of people are having.
And those perceptions, those myths and the change and evolving, the evolution, let's say, of those perceptions has been quite interesting to observe over the course of even the past 5 years, right? And today's discussion, as you know, is very much rooted. What we want to dive into is the power of brand and communication in this space and in the face of complexity as well. And one of our findings from our energy report at BrandPi, which was a survey with over 250 CEOs and CMOs in the energy sector, was that 98% of energy leaders right now are anticipating that their brand is going to need to evolve to meet the demanding needs or evolving needs of the sector and all the stakeholders within it. So I'm really interested here, Monique, let's start with you. The time you've been with Mayor since 2017, I believe, when the business was Grand Contact at the time.
Yeah.
How have you seen the EV landscape change, and how has that market evolved over the last 6 years? And how have you responded to those changing needs through?
So, well, let's start with the obvious, which is, of course, that it has evolved from being a market for the early adopters and the tech savvy people being really interested in this new technology to really be a mainstream general public interest. And with that comes also a whole range of, let's say, challenges for us at branding and communication. So, but the really interesting part is that when we founded and when Grand Contact was founded, it was founded with the basics in sustainability. So the whole business model was circling around sustainability. Hence, it also gave us employees that really deeply rooted purpose that we will strive for a better tomorrow, essentially. So it's really not an afterthought, the sustainability part of it. But coming back to the tech-savvy early movers or early adopters, then we didn't have to explain too much because people were already very forgiving in terms of they wanted this to work. And they also were in a space where they provided us rich insights and feedback, so they can be in touch with us and say, well, we want you to adjust this and this because this doesn't work. And then for us, it was really a matter of being open to that feedback. And we early recognized that being reliable, being focused on simplicity and also accessibility was really fundamental in our work going forward. And this has followed us through our journey because that really hasn't changed. And it's in fact, it has become even more important as the technology becomes more mainstream. So that consistency, you can call it luck, you can call it a genius trick, but that has been following us ever since. And also that consistency generates a lot of trust, obviously, as the years has gone by.
But drawing from, those themes there, reliability, simplicity, accessibility, drawing from almost the DNA, the roots of the brand when it was founded for those early adopters, as it's grown and reached new audiences by the sounds of things.
Definitely.
And Matt, what about yourself? You founded Chargeway at a similar time, I believe. Same question to you. How have you seen the market evolve, and how have you also evolved the brand to fit, to suit?
Well, it's interesting. I think Monique hit on a lot of very important things about how we're transitioning the type of customer base that's looking at EVs now. And I think across the globe, anywhere there has been efforts for electrification in the last 10 years, we're seeing that we are moving beyond those. I love how she put it in the fact that they were very forgiving. They were willing to give feedback. They would say, "We want this to work." I think the way she framed it was very concise and very clear, and it's spot on. And I think when we founded Chargeway, it was based on seeing that the day we're having right now was coming. Was the idea that we knew that in the long run, what Monique just described would be something that as an industry we would have to tackle. And that the hope, I think, that was happening the last 7 years by many in the space that really weren't paying attention to how we were going to have to turn that page into going beyond the early adopters into the general public was they had hard jobs to do in the moment. They just had to get the job done of, we got to get stations in the ground. We have to get the cars built. Some of these companies were saying, we don't even know how to get into the EV space. So how do we evolve our brands and our own companies, whether that's a legacy automaker, for example, or maybe a utility company. So I think in the last 7 years, what we've seen is that we were very much so looking where the horizon was. And we've been watching how the industry was responding to this evolution. And I think that what we're finally seeing now is that there was so much to be done as a collective, whether it was from auto or energy, and how those collaborations worked in the last 7 years, I think prove out how ready we were to transition to the general public. And in some cases and in some geographic areas, I think there's evidence that it's been more successful than others. I think Norway is a great example of policy, of energy, of automotive, and how you can really blend those silos together to make for a good experience for that non-early adopter, to get people to feel more, more for, well, they're less forgiving in the sense that they're going to just say, "Hey, good job, you guys made it work." And I think that in the States, here in North America, what we've seen is that there's still so much of the building the plane as you're flying it type approach to what's happening in this space. And even though for 7 years now we've been very vocal and active, it was oftentimes treated like, yeah, we'll deal that when we have to. Well, it's 2024 and now it's the we have to year. And I think that that's what we've really seen is the evolution went the way that I think many anticipated it might, in the sense that we have to get the early adopters on board, but they really weren't planning ahead oftentimes on what do we do to turn the page to have a different conversation. So evolution speaking, it's technology. It's not something that everybody gets right out of the gate. And I think you could go back and look at the history of, personal computing, and it feels very similar in a lot of ways. So I think that's, so what's changed a lot, in my opinion, to be honest. I think we were living in the future, I think, a little bit, and now we're finally here and everyone else is saying, "Oh, this is what you guys have been talking about at Chargeway." So in that way, I feel like the timing is good for us to really have bigger conversations. So.
Yeah, very interesting. You mentioned, the time is now, the year is here, 2024. And what's so interesting as well about you both as leaders is you've got such unique perspectives as pioneers in your respective regions, right? Matt, you can speak to, of course, the North American market, and Monique, yourself from a European landscape. As you look out to the future now, and this being the year when everyone's catching up, Matt, do you think there's anything the US market could learn from the EU and Europe when it comes to EVs and charging infrastructure? You touched on a couple of ideas then.
I think the fact that it took the US market so long to understand that you had to make the physical experience with the charging experience more uniform was a little bit, well, on one hand, it was surprising. On the other hand, it was like, well, here we are in the States letting the free market win. But when you're trying to accelerate transition, you'd have to have leaders in place that understand what we're actually doing on behalf of the public. And in many ways, I think that there was a little bit of kind of a handoff there saying, well, industry will solve this. And so I think the ways that the EU was able to collaborate around a physical plug type and get the automakers to, to rally around that, I think it really helps smooth the runway for a transition, because then you start to chip away at the things that are pain points for drivers, and the more pain points you can remove, the better. And I think the EU did a better job of that. That the US could have taken a page out of that book for sure. We do now have, in my opinion, an even better solution than what has happened in the EU with the connector type here in North America. There's going to be some engineers that will argue that, of course, but the physical experience of using it is very simple. Using what is called the North American charging standard now for which is effectively the Tesla North American connector. I think that took too long to get to that place, and frankly, what had been decided upon as the standard here in North America was always was an inferior product to what Tesla had developed here in North America. It just was. And so what that means now for moving forward is there other things that we can take from what the EU has done, whether it's payment processing or what other things might be smoother in certain areas of the EU that we could look at for inspiration. And I think they're there. I think the EU market is moved faster than North America. So yeah, in that respect, I think it just becomes difficult though, because as I mentioned previously, people work in silos in their respective field oftentimes, and it is difficult to open those doors and have a conversation with those outside of what you're doing to see what you could do better. So, but I think, the physical experience with charging, I think the EU's done a better job than North America for sure.
Mm. And you mentioned there some of those pain points for drivers and in the experience and some of the complexities that I think still exist, or a perception of those complexities still exists today. And one of the greatest barriers to adoption, we often think, is confidence, right? It's I read a really interesting report recently that I wanted to reference. It was around the mental load that everyone is experiencing right now, and it was in the context of the UK specifically. But when it comes to EVs, while growth is still very much anticipated, we are seeing some discourse at the moment around trepidation. We're looking at the long-term EV market forecasts being put and shaved. I think UBS cut its global long-term EV market share to 47% by 2030 recently. And we've seen a slower start to the year than I think anticipated also. So it seems there is still this undercurrent of consumer anxiety around EVs. So I would love to get both of your take on how you think brands in the sector can actively respond to this and these challenges, and how as leaders you're taking steps to build confidence.
By listening to the drivers and really respond to their, let's say, pain points, and then respond also with content that can really reassure them in terms of how well this EV experience actually can be. I often ask our customer support for feedback. They are definitely the people who have finger on the pulse at all times in terms of what the customer's challenges are and also questions or what they are wondering about.
And Matt, what about yourself?
Well, I think that well, there's a lot to unpack there. I think one of the biggest things from a confidence perspective is that, and I think a lot of brands are still trying to manage this, is we have to appreciate that within electrification, there is a little bit of a class system. Is the user experience of, let's just say, a typical, what we've known as a typical car for the last century, is if you're going to get petrol, and you could be very wealthy and go get that petrol for your car, or you could not be very wealthy and still have to go get the petrol for that car. The user experience of the automobile combined with gasoline has really been the same forever for most people. There hasn't been that aspect of do you have a benefit of who you are and how much money you make and where you live for the fueling experience, but that's not different. And so all of these brands are having to figure out how to have that conversation with their target audience. And if you're talking about energy and energy companies, utility companies, or charging networks, that matter, they do have to serve every type of customer. Now, the type of customer they might serve will potentially differ. If you're a luxury automotive brand, more than likely you're going to be selling to people that do have the benefit of charging at home quite often. If you're an entry-level automotive brand, you actually have to have an understanding of how to sell to different lifestyles potentially. And that could be someone who can fill up at home and can't. So I think the confidence factor comes into discussion when we're really, again, talking about how does this fit into your life? And every brand that's in electrification has to know how to navigate that, not only on behalf of their own brand, but then how they offer up a handoff to other brands that are going to be a part of that confidence building experience. And that's where we've seen a lot of evidence here in North America of how a lot of the stakeholders were really having siloed conversations, whether it was the automakers, the charging networks, or the utility companies. They're all stakeholders in this space, but they, for the last 7 to 10 years, they would be at the same conferences together, but they weren't necessarily really collaborating on a grand scale. And we're seeing, again, that very not proactive, but reactive moment from a lot of these companies as to, oh, we've gotten it wrong. How do we do a better job? And the best example of that is automakers in the US deciding to switch to Tesla's connector type simply so they can leverage the Tesla supercharger network here in North America, because they just handed off the charging experience to third-party networks in the US and it did not go smoothly. And even from a conversational perspective, they didn't prepare their dealerships for how to explain that experience. It was all a lack of understanding of what we're really doing on behalf of the public in many ways. And if the public doesn't have confidence in a product, they just simply won't buy it. And I think to really, how do we help other brands see that, and what have we done at Chargeway? Our whole goal always was to be agnostic and holistic, was to say, whether you're a charging network, a utility, or an automaker, we can show how your brand and product fits into the world that we've created for a driver, so they see how you can give them what they're looking for. But that's a very big conversation, and a lot of the industry in North America, at least, was not ready to have that 7 years ago. But again, maybe 2024 is the year finally.
I also think it's a matter of what stage you're in your market, obviously. I mean, we talked very much about the features and how-tos early on. And now with yourself more talking about the freedom, the go anywhere kind of messaging, and obviously the sustainability part of it as well. But definitely, like you put it, Matt, selling more of a lifestyle, because it really is, and it really is a mindset. Before you stop to fuel your ICE car, standing there to holding on for that pump for 10 minutes, whereas now you're actually fueling or powering your car while you're doing something else, not giving the charging an afterthought even. So it's really a matter of lifestyle, really.
Yeah, and you both referenced there the importance of the experience in building trust and confidence. And I know from our discussions past that you both really champion simplicity in your respective businesses and your brand experiences. What more do you think can be done to simplify the EV experience right now? What are you focusing on currently to really continue championing that ethos of simplicity?
Yeah, so from my perspective, it's really, oh, sorry, Matt.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So from our perspective, it's really a matter of, I mean, we have combined several companies now, being Mer. And for us, it's really about unifying that experience throughout our whole network. So meaning that we will get to the same backend system so that the customers can just flow easily in the backend systems, whether they charge in Norway, Sweden, UK, or wherever. And of course, we have the EU with their regulations coming to try to really simplify our customer or the overall customer journey. However, what we see is that some of the, let's say, actions that will help or is meant to help the customer journey can also be something that can complicate the customer journey. So at one end, where EU has been very good at putting regulations and steering the development, obviously also there is a need for the free competition and also for the innovation to happen. And what we've seen is that for us, being very close to the customer relationship, not moving away, then that is very important, because then we can help and assist the customer as they need to.
And Matt, what about yourself in the US context there? Monique referenced some of the regulations and almost having the right environment to innovate. How does that play out for you in a US context?
Yeah, well, from a governmental perspective, that certainly is huge. In the last 3 years with the Biden administration, they've invested heavily and done everything they can to make efforts to really push sustainable energy and energy focused efforts forward as it relates to electrification. In an election year this year, we're going to see how that could potentially transition if you're here in the U.S. It's a tragedy that electricity has been politicized here in the U.S. But here we are. And I think to that extent, that part of it that we see here in the U.S. as an example is that we're a nation of people that want to have, again, you hear the word freedom tossed around quite often. And I think that the freedom of choice is a big part of that conversation for most consumers. They don't want to be told this is what you have to do. And if a consumer doesn't have confidence in a product and they're told they have to buy it, they're going to be very upset about that. And I think that's where, from a regulatory perspective, there has been some missteps here in the US. Everything's been very well intended to spur job creation, to spur innovation with industry, to showcase this country as a leader in electrification, all well intended. But the general public has to buy into your vision. And thus far, there has been a very poor strategy around how do we communicate the value proposition of electrification in lifestyle to the American public, as an example. And I think that's where a lot of the backlash has come. So to the original question of simplification, that's part of what we were always looking at was we do need to appreciate that, and as our opening conversation pointed to, we're getting beyond those folks that were more forgiving. They need to have a sense of, okay, you've shown me how this works in my life. And I think that is really just taking a step back and looking at the landscape of the industry and the public and consumerism and saying, well, what are they doing now? And in the US, the way that they understand the car ownership experience is I have freedom of choice of the brand that I want. And once I've decided which vehicle or brand or price point fits my lifestyle, it just works. I can go and just get gas anywhere and it's amazing. And it takes me 5 minutes. And I don't have to know how it technically works either. It's literally like pouring a glass of water. It just goes into the empty space and I go. And that doesn't require, kind of to your point of the study in the UK about people feeling just mentally overwhelmed and exhausted. That's very true. And decision fatigue is very real in everyday people's lives. And so our whole goal was to say, if we know they're coming from a simple experience that they perceive, no technical understanding about, but it works for their needs, is how do we translate that new experience in a way that's simple as well? So Chargeway, using colors to identify plug types and simple numbers to identify power levels, it really brings the technical discussion down to earth for average folks who can then just say, I can go to green stations, and if I'm at a green 6, it takes me 30 minutes, but if I'm at a green 3, it takes me 2 hours. Okay, I get it. You don't have to worry about getting them on your team ideologically. You just have to help them understand how it fits in their life. And so I hope that what we can do is bring that and elevate that conversation to more stakeholders here in North America, especially because I think we're now seeing the pushback from average people saying, we're just not buying what appears to be forced. So unless you can do a better job of doing that for, average people, we're not going to be very confident. And we see dealerships now in North America and the US especially pushing back and even writing the administration saying, please stop. We can't sell these cars. And in my opinion, yes, you can sell the cars. You just don't know how to have the conversation. So.
And you referenced there, the importance of it being accessible, but also value adding. I think you both have touched on that. And value creation is so key here to what we're discussing, which is building and driving a movement. And to shift gears slightly, we see and talk a lot about the importance of business purpose and the fact that business purpose is becoming an increasingly important tool for leaders across the energy sector who really need to, I think now more than ever, clarify their business's role in the transition and the type of value that they seek to create for their stakeholders. But putting that purpose into practice, I think many are still finding very difficult. We run an annual survey, our CEO purpose report, and I think while 92% of energy CEOs said they had a purpose and they defined it, only 25% of them were using it to guide their actions and drive their sustainability goals. So there's a bit of a disconnect there between having a purpose and putting it into practice. And Matt, as CEO of Chargeway, I would love to know how important purpose is to you and your business and how you're using it as a lens for decision making.
Well, in founding the company, it was with the goal of solving a problem. And when you identify a problem that you feel you have a good answer for, it does change how you're doing your work every day. And again, in fairness, being a startup and kind of having a little bit of autonomy around, choosing exactly how you want it to go, is something that on one hand requires, the ability to say, I'm going to make the leap, but then you have to live it out. And I think that the stats that you just referenced, that most people that are high enough up the food chain, they recognize we do have to operate under this way. I think the unfortunate reality we're now facing is that, profits aren't always supported by purpose. They're supported by many other things. And how do you, that then goes from being a left brain discussion about finances and accounting and are you a functional business, to a more right brain conversation of how are you connecting emotionally with your customers or with your counterparts in other industries to make that authenticity shine through. And I think that is something that we're fighting in a very real way. I mean, if you ask what is the purpose of the fossil fuel industry, they'll say we move people, we give you plastics, we give you heat. We give, our purpose is to make life functional in the modern world. That all sounds fine, but when all that function also equates to damage based on the science we know of what happens with fossil fuels and the overuse of them, well, then we have to understand, is that purpose, does it need to be reevaluated? And unfortunately, that's a tough conversation to have. I mean, you could just look at anything that happens now with regard to even community protests around what people are saying about the fossil fuels. And there's so many people that just say, I might even agree with you, and I don't agree that they understand, that what they're doing is wrong, but boy, their purpose really makes my house warm and makes me move and gives me this plastic thing. And that's a tough thing to transition for a lot of folks. So in our world for Chargeway, our goal is to help other entities see how their purpose in the EV conversation will work. And it is a transition. It is not something that's going to be a black and white switch. We will have a gray area of moving people into that transition. But the way that we can help smooth the runway for that by giving them tools that make their product purposeful in those conversations and helps their brand show purpose is something that we really try to do in our work.
And using it as that authentic lens, as you said, in those decisions and conversations. I think we know as well from our work, and we've certainly seen that while of course it's important for every stakeholder, clarity of a business purpose is almost most important in some instances for talent, and most of whom are now seeking to work for responsible organizations. As relatively young businesses in a new and rapidly growing sector, it would be great to touch on here how you've both leveraged your business's purpose to attract the brightest talent and retain them, of course, and build your respective cultures. So Monique, I turn to you to talk to me about the Meros, which
yeah.
I follow.
What is a Mero? I got to learn about this.
Yeah, a Mero is a mayor employee. And yeah, I mean, there is a discussion obviously about should you call your colleagues a family or are you a team and so on. And we landed on Meros. And obviously just exchange one letter and then you have hero. So but yeah, we're definitely using our purpose and our mission very purposefully in our communication, both internally and externally. So our mission is to make sustainable electric mobility easy and accessible for everyone. So in this lies also, let's say, a promise of sustainability, but then also the customer centricity. And these things are also so tightly connected to our company goals, and hence that mission statement is really embedded into hopefully each and every Mero of us, and we're using it quite extensively also when we communicate. It has also been this blue thread through our whole journey as well. We had a similar mission statement way back in Grønn Kontakt, and many of our added companies later also had something similar. So this is really ingrained in every one of us, and also when we are facing a workforce that is younger, obviously we know that also having this purpose is so important. So this is not just a shiny word or a shiny sentence that we say, but this is many of our Meros are truly driven by this mission, and And I would say that you can definitely feel that when you enter our offices and hear their engagement when we're talking about EV charging even.
I certainly have myself when I've interacted with you. It's a very powerful sentiment that I think guides your actions and behaviors. I think, as we know and as we've covered here, this is a very fast moving and rapidly changing landscape. And I thank you both for, sharing your reflections on your journeys so far. What I would love to know is, what is the most important lesson that you've learned over the past 7 years in this specific space that will guide you as you both continue to unlock the power of purpose and the potential of brand to drive this movement? What one thing will you take with you from your experiences to date? Matt, I'll start with you.
It's a big question. I think the biggest thing that I've seen over the last 7 years is that you have to give people the benefit of the doubt. I think that if a consumer or the public is saying something to you about your product, it's not because they're trying to attack you or your brand personally. They're just being honest. They're just trying to tell you, this is actually how I feel about what you're doing. And it's not that there is an agenda. Oftentimes it's just people saying, look, based on what I've heard and understood about what you're doing, I don't, kind of back to the confidence conversation, I don't see how it's going to fit into my life and help make my life maintain being, in my view, what is comfortable in the ways I need comfort. And I think we need to appreciate that oftentimes the conversation and the talking points and again, Monique hit on earlier how the media will kind of keep a conversation going that may be more damaging than it needs to be is for sensationalism. And I think deep down, I think most people just need to know how what we're working on will meet their needs as an individual or as a family. And I think it's we need to take a step back and understand that what we're discussing in many ways for many people is a huge change, and change is scary. And I think it's okay to appreciate that that's real. We don't have to force the conversation. But again, like I said, just understand where people are coming from, give them the benefit of the doubt, and then ask, as Monique, I think, commented earlier, is just listen, and how can we do a better job of understanding how what we're working on, as much as we might be excited about it, how do we help people see that our excitement translates into function for them?
Things that are relevant.
I can relate. And I also want to, from our point of view, in addition to what Matt said just recent, also what we knew or what we know today might be true today, but tomorrow that might not be true, and the day after tomorrow then it certainly not might be true. I mean, this is a fast-paced, evolving environment to be in, and it's so exciting, at least for us in the business, and then obviously can be frightening, of course, for for the consumers. But then we don't know what the future holds, and being open to that is definitely a key learning from our side.
Well, I thank you both for those reflections. I think this conversation has been so illuminating, and you've touched on so many truly, truly important things around maintaining that open dialogue with your customers, your audiences, and your stakeholders, and also having clarity of why it is you're in business and what it is you're doing, and the type of value that you're seeking to create in the long term, and how that's guided both of your journeys to date. So thank you for sharing. And in the spirit of fast pace, we will now transition to our lightning round to close us off. So cue the music, and we will go through our quick fire questions that I would really like to cover with you both. So short, sharp, simple responses, first thing that comes to mind. So Matt, I'll start with you. What gives you energy every day?
I would say it's purpose. Is the work that we're doing. It really is for a greater good, but it also is fun.
Monique, what gives you purpose every day?
How can I match that? Yeah, the same, but also some quiet time, because it's a noisy world. So having some quiet time to think and reflect.
Time is so important, and I'm not very good at it. If you could change one thing about branding in this sector, what would it be?
cut the fluff.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would agree with cut the fluff. That's a big one. Here in North America, and especially in the US, I would change how regulators are impacting the ability for the energy sector to be creative.
So cut the fluff and keep regulations at bay to keep people creative. I like that. What's the secret ingredient of a powerful brand in your eyes?
I would say I'll say authenticity, which gets to the cut the fluff. Purpose is part of that, but yeah, authenticity.
Monique?
Yeah, a mix of consistency and playfulness. Yeah.
I like them. Very good. Monique, what's the most challenging part of your role?
It's a mix of let's say, coordinating all the markets, being consistent on the tone of voice in several markets.
And Matt, what about you?
As a founder, it's going through the motions of understanding you wear multiple hats, and also knowing that your time may not be the timing for what you're doing may not be exactly what everybody's ready for. Again, Chargeway's been around now for about 7 years, and again, timing's becoming better. But I think is having perseverance and conviction in what you decided to found is a big part of it. So.
Yeah, playing that long game.
Yeah.
Matt, what's the most interesting innovation that nobody's really talking about right now?
Oh man. Well, it's not the fluff, as Monique put it. Most interesting innovation. I'll be honest. I really feel there's an opportunity to, and it's not an innovation that's current. It's been around for a long time, but I think the opportunity to help people understand how they can embed energy production into their life through things like solar and home energy storage. I think that there is such an opportunity to translate that to be easier for people, but no one talks about it because we have simple and cheap energy that we've been using forever that's dirty. So I think that that's still something that should be talked about more, is how we can own energy for ourselves.
Agreed. Rise of the prosumer. Absolutely. Monique, what about you?
Oh, no, I'm not sure that nobody's talking about. I mean, I want to take a step back and root for the things. Why invent the wheel? I think we need to step back sometimes, not always thinking forward. And I'm a huge fan of sustainability, obviously. And so I'm going to go with composting, which isn't really an innovation, but I mean, that's something people should do and talk more about. Why not?
Absolutely love that answer, Monique. And I think that leads us on nicely to this one. What excites you most about the future of energy, Monique?
Oh, it feels like it's an endless route, an endless way of opportunities. I mean, talking about composting, we know that it generates heat, and heat is energy, and then energy can become, something that we can utilize. So, I mean, wow, you can go anywhere with it.
Endless possibilities. And how about yourself, Matt?
I think the word I would use is opportunity. There are so many ways, as Monique just commented on, that we're not talking about certain things. We can leverage certain things as it relates to energy. There's so much opportunity for how we can change not only industry, but most importantly, people's lives, that will be very impactful for years to come. And we're just kind of tapping into that now. People are becoming more engaged. I think it's great.
What's the one piece of advice that you'd give to another CEO or CMO? Monique?
I would say never stop playing and keep evolving, keep being curious, I would say. Yeah.
Stay curious. Matt, what about you? What's the one piece of advice you'd give to a CEO or CMO?
High level, the highest level is it sounds cliche, but people over profits. You know, honestly, if you give people the things that make their lives enriched and better, you can create amazing companies if you're thinking about people first. I mean, the best example of that in so many ways is how technology has impacted our lives, and brands like and people like Steve Jobs over the years. He can be inflammatory in some ways, and he wasn't perfect, but he understood how to impact people's lives as a leader, and we're all benefiting from it in so many different ways. And I think that the more that leaders can think on behalf of what are we doing for the customer, what are we doing for people, I think will inevitably lead to an opportunity for them to be very impactful for what they're trying to do with their companies.
Absolutely. And last one in our lightning round, what is one question that you would love to ask a fellow leader?
I have an idea. I would, if you're in the United States, I would love to ask Secretary Granholm and Secretary Buttigieg, who are managing the DOE and the DOT here in the US. We have a joint office there, and I would love to sit with both of them and ask them, how are you going to improve on how we connect the dots above just having a joint office? How are we communicating how transportation and energy truly connect in people's lives? It'd be great to have lunch with them or dinner with them and talk to them about how we do a better job of that, because what we're doing now is just not getting it.
So important. Monique, what about you?
Ooh, no, I don't think I can come up with a question that can match Matt's.
How can we all connect the dots? Let's
Yeah.
I think that's a powerful sentiment to end on as well.
It is indeed.
Very good. Well, Matt, Monique, thank you both so much for sharing your insight, and thank you everyone who has joined us today. We'll continue to share our learnings from our continued work with leaders across the sector throughout the year, and ways to connect your business brand and culture and effectively navigate the energy transition. So to stay up to date, make sure you subscribe to our Pieces newsletter on the website. But for now, thank you both, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.